Hello, welcome back to AeroSafe, the General Aviation Weather Channel. Okay, surface analysis here is what we start with. We're going to look at the weather systems that exist in the atmosphere. And then we're going to look at what those weather systems are causing in terms of the weather we care about as pilots. We got a lot of high pressure over the East Coast. As we move over into the Midwest, we see those ISO bars that are getting a little close together, showing a gradient in pressure across the surface. A low pressure system right over South Dakota and Nebraska, with troughs extending from that. Now, at that low pressure system, there's a warm front that meets a stationary front. Backside of that, there's a low pressure system. Now, over Colorado, we see a couple of mixes of pressure systems, highs and lows, with a cold front that looks like it extends all the way down past the Baja Peninsula. There's quite a few low pressure systems over Wyoming and Montana, Idaho, and then there's a pretty big low pressure, has an occluded front that meets another low pressure and a cold front. Now, they're getting really disgusting weather over there. That low pressure system is creating that cyclonic activity. As pilots, we know low pressure, the air is rising, moving inward and counterclockwise. Okay, so we've got counterclockwise moving wind that is forcing that cold front down and over, eventually going to come over the coast of California. So that cold front is going to force warmer, moist air up, and it's just going to dump a bunch of rain over California for a couple days. It's going to be gross. So there's our surface analysis. Let's look now at the interactive map on flight service, 1-800-weatherbrief.com. And we're going to look at our categorical information. Are we VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, or low IFR? So to accompany those high pressure systems across the eastern US, we've got beautiful weather for flying. Not a whole lot of ceilings. We do see a little bit of cloud coverage as indicated by some partially filled in stations, but they're green. Green means VFR. An open circle means there's no clouds at all. No few, scattered, broken, or overcast. Anywhere, floor to ceiling. As we move into the Midwest, where we saw some troughs, we are seeing the development of some clouds, a couple of ceilings here. Let's see. Kansas City has overcast at 20,000. Oh, and winds are gusting to 20 knots, 180 to 20 knots. We do see that's kind of in the midst of some ISO bars there. Texas looks pretty good. We'll look over here at Lubbock. Now, okay, there are some clouds in Texas. But again, they're pretty high. Broken at 14,000, broken at 20,000, overcast at 250. And interesting, there's some virga. Virga is when precipitation falls. So there's enough moisture in the cloud, and there's a condensation nuclei around which that condensation can attach, get heavy enough, and fall as precipitation. But it reaches a point in the atmosphere on its way down that it evaporates before it hits the ground. That's what virga is. Really, really beautiful. Where we're really getting into some trouble up here is the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho, and then of course California, where that low pressure and occluded front and the cyclonic activity are bringing in that cold front and some precipitation. So we've got low IFR, we've got marginal VFR, we've got IFR. Obviously, looking at this, VFR, beautiful east of the Mississippi. Now, last week, west of the Mississippi was beautiful. So it looks like we finally got a little bit of that pretty weather here. It's west of the Mississippi, still pretty nice until we get a little farther west, a little farther north, and we've got some yucky stuff going on, which is a result of that stationary front and the low pressure systems. Generally speaking, east of the Mississippi and near the Mississippi on the west side are going to be really nice. Southern part of the U.S., really great as well. Moving up into the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, that's definitely IFR weather. So make sure that your personal minimums in terms of ceilings and visibility are met before you go, and that your instrument current and proficient. California over there, that's really nasty stuff. What's going on in Arcata? All right, special observation. Winds are variable at 3 knots, 2.5 miles of visibility. Rain, mist, scattered 2,000, overcast 2,600. Temperature dew point spread is very low. Temperature is 6 degrees Celsius. Dew point is 5 degrees Celsius. Now we know when there's a low temperature dew point spread, or if there is no spread, meaning temperature and dew point are the same, then the air has reached its saturation point, and at that moment we can expect some condensation in the air, meaning clouds, or what we call it close to the ground, fog. We're going to look at Airmets now. We're going to look at Zulus and freezing levels, graphical depiction of the freezing levels. Okay, it's actually been pretty warm lately. Look at that freezing level from Texas up to Nebraska over to Georgia. Freezing level is 12,000 or above. Over my part of the world in Kentucky, freezing levels between 8,000 and 12,000. And it's not until we get up above the Great Lakes on the eastern part of the U.S. where the freezing level's at the surface. If we highlight this freezing level at the surface, there's an area extending down Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, down over to the Four Corners, Nevada. That whole area has freezing level on the surface, which means if you are in the clouds or visible moisture anywhere on the surface or above, you will accumulate icing. Icing is very dangerous, and for us, without structural anti-icing or de-icing equipment, that is a no-go. That's a no-go. Nasty. And then also across large parts of that western U.S., we've got Airmet Zulus. Let's see what the levels are for those. This one that's over the Dakotas is between the freezing level and the tops of 210. They are saying the freezing level is between 7,000 and 12,000. Realistically, you could fly below 7,000 feet and stay out of freezing conditions. However, remember, we got to be looking at ceilings. We got to be looking at tops. We need to determine, are we instrument current and proficient? Can I fly and approach? Do I feel safe in these conditions? And just how far below the freezing level can I be while maintaining minimum safe altitudes? So that's what you'd have to look at right now if you were up in that area. If we go a little bit farther west, we see this icing Airmet begins. The bases are between the surface and 5,000 feet, extending up to flight level 180. So I would not fly in the clouds in this area, kind of what we talked about with that freezing level depiction. And this one over Colorado, largely, freezing level is between 6,000 and 9,000. So that's the base of this Airmet, and then the tops are up to flight level 220. Okay. Red Airmet here is for IFR conditions. So ceiling below 1,000, visibility below 3 statute miles. For me, personally, when I'm getting into a position where I see an Airmet for IFR conditions in my light piston aircraft, that's starting to look like a no-go for me. Ceilings that low, visibility that low, you may have a hard time returning to the field if there's a problem. And when it gets to the point of being an Airmet, that means the area is big enough that that system is large and your capability of getting out of those conditions is beginning to decrease. I don't like that. Huge mountain obscuration. Basically, all of the west is covered by mountain obscuration. Mountain obscuration, Airmet Zulu, light piston aircraft. Those are your 3 holes in the Swiss cheese right there. Not to mention any mechanical issues or human factor issues that you might encounter when you're getting ready to go on a flight. That whole part of the west of the U.S. is not looking good. Really not. Airmet Tango. The green Airmets here are high level turbulence. So we've got a couple of those that have this really interesting arc shape to them. I kind of like that. That's pretty to me. The orange are low level wind shear. And then the yellow are low level turbulence, which is moderate. So this one over Texas up to Nebraska, that low level turbulence Airmet, moderate turbulence, base at 8,000, tops at 180. So that's going to be really uncomfortable. The one a little bit farther west over the Four Corners is begins at the surface and goes up to 180. Again, moderate in severity, not comfortable. I wouldn't do that. Okay, so, in this Four Corners area, we had Airmet Zulus, we had mountain obscuration. We already said we're flying light piston aircraft. And then you add into that the low-level turbulence. There are so many holes in this Swiss cheese starting to form and showing themselves. We are not going to go. We're not going to go. I hope to see none of you flying in this area today. Altitude of 9,000 feet. They've got ice. Trace to light mix of ice right in that little precipitation area. Now, Beach 1900 is going to have anti-icing, structural anti-icing and de-icing equipment. We don't have that. So it's really nice of him to make that PIREP. He's got the capability to fly in it. He's certified to do that. We are not. Now we know if we were to fly at 9,000 feet in that area, those are known icing conditions. We're going to stay out of that. Icing. At 7,000 feet, Piper P-46 experienced light rime ice during the descent. So for me, there's a lot of reasons to stay out of the air today in the western part of the U.S. We've got icing, we've got turbulence. We have IFR condition, airmets all over the place, and we also have mountain obscuration. So from a weather and conditions standpoint, that's some of the stuff that would prevent you from wanting to fly. That does not include other things that should be within your personal minimums, like how much sleep you got last night, if you had anything to drink with dinner last night, if there's anything stressing you out. And it also doesn't mention anything about your airplane. So is your aircraft mechanically sound? Are there any safety of flight issues? So northwest and west, there's a lot of stuff there that makes me want to say that would be a no-go situation. This is a really great one when you're looking at trying to decide, am I flying from marginal conditions into better conditions? Am I flying from good conditions into worse conditions? The best way to use this chart is to look regionally where you are, because the data points that they present to us, they have to shrink the map down. So the data points they present to us are pretty far apart and therefore not super accurate. They're not really depicting what's going on very well. Let's look at the surface prog chart for tomorrow. So that's going to be Thursday. Low pressure system has moved down over the Dakotas. That's like the big storyline here. High pressure system's still a little bit over the East Coast. That low pressure over the Dakotas and Minnesota has got a cold front extending all the way down over Texas and Mexico. With that low pressure system is going to come a high likelihood of rain. It's going to get cold with that cold front, so we'll need to pay attention to freezing levels and the presence of visible moisture, so precipitation or clouds. If it's icing conditions, that's no-go. We're not doing it. That low pressure that was over the coast of California is coming in and still got that cyclonic activity bringing in precipitation with it. But look what's forming over the Pacific Ocean. A beautiful high-pressure system. My hope for our West Coast friends is that this high-pressure system will bring with it some really lovely weather in a couple of days. But for now, looks like your SOL, significant weather prognostic chart. All the red squiggles indicate IFR conditions, ceiling below 1,000 feet and or visibility below 3 miles. Outside of that, we see the blue cloud squiggles, and those indicate marginal VFR, so that ceiling between 1,000, 3,000, and visibility between 3 to 5 miles. So lots of areas of IFR weather. You're going to need an instrument flight plan. You're going to need to look at the conditions where you are, compare those to your personal minimums, hold to your personal minimums. Stay safe. So as a recap, East Coast looks beautiful and will be for a little bit. Western part of the U.S., there are several reasons not to fly. If you're interested in some AeroSafe swag, drop a comment below about 3 pilot friends that you want to share this channel with. Then I'll reach out to you and ask you for some contact information so that I can send you your swag. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's video from AeroSafe, the aviation weather channel.